Guess who's back? Back again. There we go. I got a little more energy in me. Yummy, yummy chicken, jalapeno pepper casserole my wifey made. I think I got a little more juice to finish up this last part of the slides. We're about halfway through, so that worked out pretty well. If we were in person, in the chat box or unmute and share, describe two supports that you noticed in the previous slide. So, there's that slide that we're talking about. What kind of supports did you notice? I brought up some of the things that I thought about in regards to things of how they kind of put all the distracting stuff to the sides and the back and allowed for a lot of attention in the front. That's one of the things I put up there for myself. And maybe talking about the whack-a-mole we had there with our students. And then, is there something you have thought about in terms of a well-structured classroom that you would like to implement? What kind of things are currently going on in your own classroom that you kind of are thinking, maybe that's something I should start thinking about? Maybe you want to start thinking about these 5 key support strategies? Question mark? Maybe. Priming, academic modifications, visual supports, reinforcements, and home base. These are some strategies we are going to discuss here in the next few slides. The first one being priming. What is priming? Priming is exposure to academic course material or tasks before instruction. Why should you use this strategy? It gives students the chance to become familiar with the material or skills and increases the likelihood they will learn and use key concepts. Priming is most effective when it is built into the student's daily routine. So let's take a quick look at what this might look like.
Your teacher gave me the master copy and your notes sheet so that you can fill it out beforehand, and then she's going to call on you for the first one.
Priming students means exposing him or her to course material before a lesson takes place. It gives students a chance to become familiar with the material and increases the likelihood they'll learn key concepts and details.
The teacher who stands in front of her chemistry class and says, first, we're going to read Chapter 7, pages 19 to 25. Then I'm going to tell you what is important in those pages, and then you're going to do an experiment. Okay, that's priming.
What? Atoms? Exactly, atoms.
Priming is most effective when it's built into the student's daily routine, and teachers can work with parents to help reinforce this strategy at home.
What happens if you don't like the food?
I just don't spit it out.
Thank you. What do you do?
Just leave it aside.
Okay, good. And what?
I would prime him about a week before he had something due. If he had a test on Friday, the teacher made sure I knew about it on Monday. If there's a big assignment, I had to prime him for about 2 months. Because out of sight, out of mind, if you do a little bit of the work 1 week and you wait 2 weeks, he forgets about the assignment.
If you are a good teacher, you are probably doing some form of priming right now as we speak. For instance, myself, and I'm not tooting my own horn or saying I'm a great teacher or anything like that, but what I am saying is, generally at the start of the day, I like to go around to my students and say hello. And for some of my students, I might ask them, if they understand what the plans are for the day and my routine, and ask them if they know that they see what I'm looking at in the Google Classroom, and maybe go over 1 or 2 points with them. Now, this was a very in-depth look at priming here. One of the weaknesses of this is, guess what? It does take some time, and it does take some communication skills, maybe some co-teaching strategies as well. You need to have a lot of good communication with your paraeducators, with maybe your special education teachers or your general education teachers. Knowing what the lesson plans are, knowing what exact questions are going to be asked in the lesson. If you're a elementary school teacher and you do lots of different lessons over the course of the day, you do like a language arts lesson, then a math lesson, and maybe a science lesson, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of time. So might not be the easiest strategy to do, but doing some form of priming at the start of the day with specific students who do have a special education with an autism spectrum disorder, doing something like this with them to start the day for even just like a minute or two can go a long way in helping you help that individual get an educational success story going.
Your teacher gave me.
I hate
the
how that does that. Let's go on. So what does priming look like? Some things you can do is you can have a worksheet and you come over to the student beforehand and say, these are the questions you're being asked. Let's get it ready. Maybe you have some visual processing or maybe some kind of pictures at your desk to talk about what the lessons are going to be and who's going to be asking you what. Um, so yeah, just lots of the similar things we saw in that video there. Academic accommodations and modifications. We should all know, if you're in special education, what academic accommodations and modifications are. A modification is when the content is changing the standard. What does that mean? So you might have to do certain modifications for certain individuals to teach them material that is not necessarily state standard specific. Accommodations, on the other hand, are state standard specific, and you're making adaptations to meet the student's specific needs to meet those state standards. But sometimes you might have to make modifications in your classroom in order to do specific standards for that student that is not necessarily at their age range, or maybe it doesn't even have to deal with standards in the first place. Maybe you're just doing a lesson and you're saying in little Johnny's day, he's going to have a 30-minute period of time where he just goes over what his schedule is for the day. That's a lot of time out of the classroom, and you might be considering that as a modification for a student, okay? If you're taking that much time out of the day in order to discuss scheduling with them, okay, as the teacher. Now, you might have OT services or something like that come in and offer those services once every other week or something like that for 30 minutes. That's not necessarily a modification. But in the general scheme of things, we're generally talking a lot about accommodations when we're talking about working with students, any of our students, regardless of their disability or ability. So, examples: read directions out loud, extend time on assignments or tests, allow students to resubmit work after giving feedback. These are all different ideas of what some accommodations might look like. Maybe you give them a multiple choice test as opposed to a short answer. Maybe as opposed to a multi-paragraph answer, you might give them just a short paragraph. Things like that are examples you could use. Maybe instead of writing down answers for an assignment, they're able to give the answers orally. Other suggestions there for what you might look at for different accommodations for students. Remember that flexible thing I was talking about in the first week of class? This is where it comes in. An IEP at a glance can be useful to communicate academic modifications with your other staff or anybody who comes in to visit your classroom, as long as, of course, they are privy to that IEP information. Let's look at some examples of academic accommodations and modifications. And yes, there are a lot of videos in these slides.
A second strategy for teachers is to make academic modifications, adapting the content or format of assignments to meet the student's specific needs.
Academic modifications can range from read aloud directions on tests, extended time on assignments, long-term assignments if they're having trouble doing them at home. Whatever they need, I'm going to provide for them and I'm going to be patient with them.
It could also be the case that you might have a student who has tremendous difficulty with word retrieval. So maybe I present multiple choice questions. Maybe I present a word bank.
If there's a reading assignment of 30 pages, I do not expect a student with autism to do that, unless that's their competency.
Shortened assignments are a thing
second strategy.
you can do. Absolutely. Some questions you might have. How do I know if my student needs academic modifications or accommodations? Who do I ask? Where are student individualized education? Where are student individualized education programs? Where in an IEP do I find information on academic modifications? If you don't know these, okay, oh geez, what was the page exactly where it is academic modifications and things like that? Give me a second. I am going to take a quick look at my own SACE just to double check this stuff and make sure I am giving good information. Since this is my own dress rehearsal, I should know these things off the top of my head, but I am a visual guy. I sometimes need these little reminders as to where to find this information. So I'm just looking at one of my student IEPs right now. I'm not going to say the name of this particular individual for confidentiality needs, but when you're looking for academic modifications or accommodations, one of the things you can look at is probably your special factors page and see if there's anything in there for your student in regards to assistive technology devices, or if they need low incidence services or equipment, if they are blind or visually impaired, or if they are deaf or hard of hearing. If you look at those special factors, you typically find anything that might be necessary for a student's needs for their accommodations or modifications. Sometimes also, if you look at the present levels, and I'm going to go to this particular student's present levels right now, you might see under their present levels and their pre-academic academic functional skills mentions of needs for what a student needs from that is coming from an older coming to you from a previous grade if you've never worked with a student before. Basically what I'm trying to say is if you have a student with an IEP and you think they need specific academic accommodations or modifications and you're the teacher, you can put those specifically accommodations into the IEP. Now, when it comes to modifications, you're going to want to have talks then with administration, family, OTs, speech and language pathologists, whoever might be in that student's IEP to discuss those modifications. And generally, you want to have an IEP meeting if that's what you're talking about. But for accommodations, you can put down your suggestions on your IEP when you present the IEP and talk about them with an IEP. And 9 times out of 10, families are going to go, yes, give me my child all the accommodations they need. I would love them. I want them to do well at school. And everybody's like, yes, let's give them accommodations. And that will happen in the present levels or in the special factors. And then statewide assessments will also have areas where you can talk about accommodations for test taking and things of that nature. And you can also, in your goals, in the body of your goals, bring up any kind of accommodations that a student might need in order to help meet those goals. So lots of different places in regards to where you can find accommodations, modifications, and how to do it. Okay? Where are student individualized education programs? I don't know why Michelle put that in there. When I think of where are student individualized education programs, or IEPs, I think they're either in your classroom, in a file cabinet, online, or at the district office. Typically where you find them. And where in an IEP do I find information? I basically already expressed that earlier. Oh, and who do I ask? I mean, you're the teacher. And also the IEP team when you're bringing those things up. Visual supports. What are visual supports? Visual supports. Oh, and I should log out of my SACE here real quick. Visual supports. There we go. Visual supports are any tool presented visually that supports an individual as he or she moves through the day. Visual supports might include pictures, written words, objects within the environment, visual boundaries, schedules, maps, labels, timelines, organization systems, and scripts. Visual supports for all students. Provide study guides that highlight the main points of the lesson. Highlight key parts of the text. If you are a visual learner and you are someone who has autism, you might look at this big old jumble of words and go, my eyes, they hurt. I can't look at all that. So getting a highlighter and going, hey, here's the big piece of information and here's a big piece of information might help them when they want to answer comprehension questions on a test. That is a form of a visual support. They can also take the form of self-management tools that help the students stay focused and understand their behavior. Maybe you have a little comic strip on their desk that has Henry seated, Henry raising his hand, Henry getting positive praise from the teacher and saying, thank you, Henry, for raising your hand. Something along those lines. A graphic organizer that helps the student highlight important information. So as opposed to getting little pieces of paper with the assignments on them, maybe they have just like a binder in there that's already preloaded with the assignments for the day by the teacher. And it says a little on a tab, language arts, math, science. And it flips over to the exact page with some highlighted areas right off the bat. Social scripts that help the student understand what to say or how to act in particular situations. This can go hand in hand with priming, where you go, hey, Joe, let's go over some of the scripts that we are expected to say. When the teacher says, hello, Joe, what do you say? Hi, Miss Miriam, I'm doing good. Something along those lines. Going a little back and forth, practicing like that. Haven't had to do that with any of my students yet, though I've definitely done some behavior skills and life skills around that, but not specifically a social script yet. Actually, while I'm talking about this, maybe I might do that with my students tomorrow. Good idea. Self-management. Here is an example of a visual script or support that a student might have. Checklist. I have remembered to include a clear and lively opening in my paragraph. I have included a suitable problem for my paragraph. I have created a balanced ending to my paragraph. That's how I kind of read it. My story. What are we talking about? Are we talking like multiple paragraphs? Are we talking about 2 pages? What are we talking about? I have used capital letters at the start of my sentences and for people's names. I remembered to put full stops at the end of my sentences. I have included what the character would see, hear, smell, feel, and taste. You might have to go over this with some of your students every once in a while. Are they going to use a checklist like this? For some of my students, I might present this to them. They go, what the heck? I'm not using this. Whereas some might go, oh, okay, this is cool and kind of cool. But this is an example of what a visual tool might look like. Good old graphic organizers. That good old thought bubble. Give me the topic or concept or theme. Have a main idea about that. Give me some details. Note-taking sessions. During class, take notes here. After class, edit and summarize here. Why did that happen? And later, your ideas, thoughts, questions here. A little menu for the student to use is another example of a way to use a visual support. Something else I want to throw out there that's in the notes. Great online resources for this right here on this particular note page. Oh, if I can get it. Maybe I should have just done this in a smaller. There we go. Boom. Having some issues. Why am I having issues? There we go. Boom. Oh, well, we've already gone through this before. Let's try this. Yeah, no, unfortunately, that is not something I'm going to be able to use. I think that's something that Michelle would have before. Oh, well, going on. Slideshow. Like I said, this is kind of my dress rehearsal. Lets me know what I have, what I don't have. Visual for a social script. So social scripts, looking while listening. When someone is talking to me, I try to listen. This is a very nice thing to do. There are a lot of times that I have to be a good listener. If I look at the ceiling and other things in the room, the other person may not know I am listening. This is what you need to do next. So a social script is basically telling a student what a basic expectation is when somebody is talking to them. Looking while listening. One of the biggest problems that some students with autism might have is looking at an individual while they are talking. That is a very common thing, and they might have to be taught that skill by using such things as a social script. Visuals in general, guess what? Help everyone learn. Even students who don't have an autism spectrum disorder. First pants, then your shoes. Pun of the day: if you don't pay your exorcist bill, you get repossessed. And then first period, second period, fourth period. Anyway, all these visuals can help people when we're trying to figure out how to learn. What do visual sports look like in this little video? Let's take a look.
Because students with autism tend to be more visual learners, they may benefit from having a copy of their daily schedule or one posted in the room to help guide them through the day.
I prefer a printed schedule because that way I'd remember things more clearly, and that way I'd stay more organized.
Another visual support, graphic organizers, present material in a way that makes it easier for a student to understand.
CIAN.
They not only highlight important concepts and facts, but display the relationship between them.
Instead of this big piece of paper, it lists out all the different kinds of spaces.
Another type of visual support is what's called a social script.
Social scripts tell the student what to say in a particular situation. Quite often, the resource room teacher can write the scripts, and the student can have them on note cards or on a piece of paper in his or her notebook. For example, for the student who has difficulty asking a question, you may actually have a script that says, "I forgot my math book today. Can you help me figure out what to do?"
Sometimes it'll just be appropriate responses. Sometimes a student just might need an initiation statement. How do I join this group? What's an appropriate thing to say? So it's going to vary depending on how much the individual needs.
If a student has difficulty mastering a recurring event or routine, the teacher can make a short video with a smartphone or video camera.
Sometimes a way for them to really understand what it is about their behavior that needs to change, or what it is about their behavior that really worked. So if you can capture that and then link it to self-monitoring and say, okay, how did you do? Did you make eye contact with them? Did you listen when they had something to say? And many individuals with autism who could not have a conversation with you about that could look at a visual description of it and say whether or not that element was happening or needed to happen.
One of the things about videotaping, you do want to make sure that you have the parents okay with that. Because I found that when I've done that with my students before, they go, "Oh, we want that on YouTube," or "Hey, it's something along those lines." It's like, I can't do YouTube, guys, because there's a non-disclosure agreement, not NDAs. There's certain paperwork that keeps me from posting things online. Is basically what I tell them, and that's true. There's a lot of different things where confidentiality issues are in regards to, but. It is kind of cool to do kind of videotaping stuff sometimes. They really do like that, and if you do it in the context of just your own classroom, very effective way to get your kids working on this kind of stuff. All right, in the chat box or in Mute and Share, if you were here with me in person, I think for this I'm just going to have chat box. What visual supports do you provide to all the students in your classroom if you are teaching? And what visual supports would you provide that might benefit the whole class? What student-specific visual supports could you provide? Take a second to think about that. I've probably shared quite a bit here that you might bring up yourself that you go, ooh, that's kind of a cool idea. Reinforcement. What is reinforcement? Reinforcement rewards students for behaving in ways that are productive and support their continued growth. It's kind of true. It's very true, actually. You can also reinforce negative behaviors, though. That's the behaviorist in me kind of bringing that little fact up. But we are trying to reinforce the positive stuff when we do this thing. Examples of reinforcement: verbal praise, computer time, homework pass, I have a token economy in my own classroom. So sometimes I give students extra money in their accounts that they can use at a student store in my classroom. Sometimes I just go around giving stickers. I have this little sticker pad that's filled with a bunch of uh, Japanese stickers that I got over at Japantown in San Francisco. Cost me $1. And just got all these really cool little stickers. And the students go, "Oh, I want this sticker. I want this sticker." And I put it on their computer or on their desk. Some of the kids like to put them on the back of their cell phones. And it's just like, hey, I was like, hey, do that math for another 10 minutes. I got another sticker for you. And they go, okay. And they do their math for 10 minutes. And I come back with another sticker. They love it. Okay. That's an example of reinforcing that particular positive behavior. Remember, a teenager with ASD may need to be reinforced for things that others do not need to be reinforced. One of the trickier things if you're running a special education classroom is when you have special reinforcements for other students and maybe not others, and they go, hey, why don't I get that? And it's always that really tough little conversation of, we're all in here for our own reasons. Certain people are in here for other things, and other people have different things in their plan. Always tough for some kids to get that around in their head. I try to be as global as I can when I'm doing reinforcement because of that particular need, but it really is an individualized education plan for all the students in your class, and you need to make sure that you're doing the things that are in the IEP for that specific kid. If there's something specific in there for a type of reinforcement that particular student likes, and they say you must use that in your classroom, use it. It's by the law. You have a legal document. What does reimbursement look like? Let's take a look. Reinforcement look like? Let's take a look.
What do you need for photosynthesis to take place? The sun! Very good!
The final support strategy, reinforcement, rewards students for behaving in ways that are productive and support their continued personal growth. Some common reinforcers include verbal praise, additional break or computer lab time, or homework passes.
So reinforcement is simply something that you do that increases the likelihood of behavior.
Great question. Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, a good teacher uses reinforcement all the time. They're just using it naturally. But the kid with autism, the teenager with autism, may need reinforcement for things that no one else does, like talking to your friends or not engaging in repetitive speech.
There we go.
What do you need
And
for
there
photosynthesis?
we go again, but that's going to be really annoying when I'm doing that in class, I tell you what. Another little strategy, home base. What is home base? Home base is a designated area where students with ASD can go to regain control during times of stress. So, some examples we have here in these pictures. The library. What better spot than a nice, quiet library for someone who might have hypersensitivity issues? Doesn't get much better than that. Or an art area. An art area where they can focus on just what they're doing right there and just hang out and relax. Like I said before, I have that little spot right next to my classroom. We got a couple picnic benches. Nice, relaxing, calm. He likes to go there. That's his home base. Simple idea, yet effective. In the chat box or in mute and share, where would be a good home base for your students? Why? Do you have an area already set aside in your classroom where you might have a quiet corner? Do you have those noise canceling headphones that I brought up and maybe have a spot where they can just read and relax? Do you have a spot outside somewhere that is nice and secluded and maybe away from the rest of the group? It is a good thing to have for your students with an autism disorder. More supports. These 5 support strategies can help teachers provide the structure that students with ASB need to learn effectively. ASB. I'm pretty sure they meant to say ASD there. For other evidence-based practices for students with ASD, visit Autism PDC. Let's take a quick look there. Takes you over to the National Professional Developmental Center on Autism Spectrum Disorder. And you got a nice little website with more tools to use, including evidence-based practices here that you can use all at your leisure right here. Education specialists, you will have 2 courses dedicated to teaching students with ASD in year 2 of your program. All of you who are getting your teaching credentials through this program, I'm sure will have a autism component added to your credential so that you become that much more employable and showing that you have the ability to work with students who have an autism diagnosis. Effective use of teacher supports. So we talked about teacher supports already. Where can you turn? 3 primary supports can enhance your efforts when working with students with ASD. The student's IEP, special education teachers, and paraprofessionals. These are the things you should turn to should you need help with students with ASD. If you feel your students need supports, identify your school's key contact for beginning the process of acquiring additional supports. So, all of us here are in different situations, in all different classrooms, in all different districts, in all different areas. Some of you are in public schools, some of you are in private schools, some of you are in non-public schools. You should ask your principal or your fellow teachers where you need to go in order to get additional supports for almost any of your students. You have a student that's being specifically difficult in one way or another. If it's something where you think it needs to be occupational therapy, you go see your OT. If you think it's something that has to do with counseling, you go see your counselor. If you have something where you think it's whatever have you, figure out who your key supports are and who your key to go people are in order to help you with your students' needs. The IEP goal description. Given a topic, Luke will write a well-formulated paragraph with a topic sentence, 2 or more supporting sentence, and closure or statement, blah, blah, blah. This is basically just an example here that they're showing in regards to what an IEP looks like and what an IEP goal looks like. So one of the things you should always be doing is reviewing your IEP goals to seeing what the needs are of your students. If it's the start of a school year, take a minute to look at those IEPs. Now, well, it's not going to be a minute. Again, all of you work in different settings. All of you have different access to IEPs. All of you have different access to different students who have an IEP. Talk with your fellow professionals to see where you can find the information you need in order to help the students be as effective as they possibly can inside your classroom. An IEP is the central document that serves as the student's roadmap to education. It lays out students' present skills and skills that teachers should work with the student to improve, including academic and non-academic goals. It can include also behavioral goals, social emotional goals, transition goals, work goals, things like that. It structures the learning process for students with an ASD and other special needs to ensure they are reaching their full potential. Some questions you might have: where are the IEPs located? I discussed this a little bit earlier. They might be at your school's front office. It might be at your special education teacher's file folder. A lot of it's online nowadays. You might need to access it through the SACE system, typically where you find them. Do general education teachers need to access the full IEP, or is there a summative form, an IEP at a glance provided? It could be. Depends on where you're looking at. Where can general education teachers find strategies that have worked in the past for a particular student? Well, typically in that IEP. Looking at the present levels of performance is one of the first spots I would look at when I'm talking about working with students who need help with those particular things. Special education teachers. The special education teacher is the guide to the student's disability and IEP. Special education teachers help monitor the IEP and make sure the student is making progress. If the student is not making progress, they can think of an alternative way to help the student make progress. Paraprofessionals or paraeducators are not often present in general education classrooms. When they are, paraeducators help keep students with ASD focused on the classroom teacher and provide reinforcement when they are paying attention. Paraeducators can make sure the student is on task, has materials, has necessary supports. Paraeducators are not responsible for developing curriculum content. Typically, paraprofessionals and the special education teachers work hand in hand to figure out what the students' needs are. The special education teachers being the professionals here, henceforth why paraprofessionals are considered the paraeducators. They're the ones who are helping to help the special education teacher implement plans that the special education teacher has let them know is needed inside the classroom for academic success. Choices. Choose one. On the next slide, you will find 3 choices. Choose one of them. Listen to an Autism Helper podcast in which Sasha Lon explores training staff on how to work together to help students with ASD, good for education specialists who may work with paraeducators. Watch The Forgotten History of Autism. Read the cartoon on understanding the spectrum. After watching, listening, or reading, go to Canvas Module 5 and complete the exit ticket for Session 3. Okay, so here's your choices. Let's see here. Listen to the Autism Helper podcast. So there's the podcast, The Forgotten History of Autism with Steve Silberman. And read this cartoon right here. So you have those 3 choices. There's that. Stop that. It's annoying. It's really annoying. And then have a great evening. Stay for the cafe time. So real quick, let's take a quick look here at my exit tickets. So modules. Exit ticket 3. Record yourself answering the following questions. What resonated with you in regards to tonight's discussion on ASD? What practices do you think you personally can put into practice for all your students? What is something you would like to learn more about? Interesting. Let me take a look at the student view here. Start assignment. File upload, text entry. Looks like you can just do a text if you want to. Or that file upload. Oh, and then here's a webcam. Use webcam. Gotcha. Okay. So you can just, okay. I think for the purposes of this, I'm going to have this be, you can either do a text entry here or the webcam. I'm going to make it either way you want to do it. Okay. And that goes hand in hand with this, the choices one. So what I would want you to do is I want you to do the exit ticket, these 3 questions. I want you to bring up, though, what one of these things you did in your choices. And let's see here. Bring that up in either 1, 2, or 3. You know, just bring up what was brought up or you thought about as you watched one of these 3 choices is what I would ask for your exit ticket. So answer the 3 questions and make sure you bring up one of these 3 things you did in regards to it. And that's the class. That'll be it. A little more talking on my end. And it'll be a little longer too because we'll have a lot of talking during class. I think I got maybe like 50 minutes of talking on this. But I hope that was helpful. There's a lot of good information on this particular slide, especially when in regards to working with students with autism. Henceforth, why we had that specifically for this week. This does help for you, that particular, like I said, all of you in your teaching credentials, they're going to be looking for that one little piece that says can teach students with autism. It's one of the big things when you're talking about your teaching credential. And it's one of those classes that help that. All right. Everybody have a good day. Bye-bye.